Hey, gang, coming up on our Finding Better podcast, Arlene Cohen Miller is joining me, and we're going to talk about finding better through coaching. The fact of the matter is, we all know you look at star athletes, you look at the top people in anything, they all have coaches. Now, the question is, how do you get your own coach? Here's the twist. We're going to talk about your inner voice. And Arlene is going to talk about how that inner voice that we all have is oftentimes pretty negative, and that inner voice is actually a critic. So, what we're going to talk about is transforming that inner critic into an inner coach. It is really interesting, really fascinating, could change your life. And it's all about finding better through coaching. And the twist is becoming your own better coach. Here we go. Hello, hello, and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and I am your host. And this is where we share real life experiences. We don't talk about opinions, we don't talk about academics, we don't talk about theories. It's all about real life experiences and wisdom. Because, sometimes a really wonderful path to success is to follow in the footsteps of people who have already been there. And so this is what Finding Better is all about. Today, I have a rock star with me. Figuratively and, okay, we'll call it literally. Arlene Cohen Miller is with me today. Arlene, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for calling me a rock star.
Well, listen, yeah, and you're gonna understand why. My audience is gonna understand why I called you a rock star in just a second. But the topic of today is empowering your inner voice from critic to coach. Whoa. We all have that stupid inner voice inside of us telling us that we're not good enough, that we can't do things, all that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about how to change that from something that is disempowering to empowering, right?
Right.
Is that right, Arlene? Okay, good. All right. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce you to Arlene, give a little bit of her background. And this interview is about becoming aware of how you are talking to yourself, how that sets you up for success or failure, and how to empower that inner coach and de-energize that inner critic. This is going to be so cool. And so anyway, it's really wonderful because this podcast is all about finding better, right? And a big part of it starts and ends right here. Okay, so about Arlene. Arlene is a CEO of Jewel Consultancy. She's a leadership coach who helps women compassionately and wholeheartedly lead themselves. I'm going to ask you about that, Arlene. Lead themselves. That's really interesting to create the life they desire, a life that works and feels right to them with work-life harmony. I love that too. It's not work-life balance. You're calling it work-life harmony. Arlene is also an AV rated Colorado attorney. I did some research on Arlene and I went back and I said, okay, what does that mean? I'm going to let you guys know because this is a big part of the rock star stuff, including everything else about her. All right, an AV rated Colorado attorney refers to a lawyer in Colorado who has received the highest rating from Martindale Hubbell, a respected peer review system for evaluating lawyers in the United States. Here's what it means. The A in AV is on a scale of A, B, and C, and it's the highest level of legal ability, right? The V has to do with very high ethical standards. So that's wonderful. So an AV preeminent rating means that the attorney has been endorsed by her peers, has demonstrated exceptional legal skill and integrity, and has shown a strong reputation for professionalism and ethics. That is really wonderful and a very, very prestigious level of recognition. Congratulations, Arlene, on that. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get into this. What the heck? All right, all right. Empowering your inner voice. First of all, let's talk about the inner voice, and then let's talk about empowering it.
Yeah. The inner voice, my cartoon thing is like on remember Charlie Brown and whack, 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 whack.
Yeah.
That's my joke about the inner voice. It's like the part of us Mine used to talk to me all the time in my car. I'd be just flying other places. I'd get alone in my car and it would just go like crazy, that inner critic kind of stuff,
Yep.
everything had been wrong, all the mistakes I'd made, how I wasn't going to be able to do this or that. So that the inner voice can either be positive or negative. We sort of program ourselves. So if we programmed ourselves a negative, we can reprogram ourselves to the positive. But in the earlier part of my life, there's a lot of negative self-talk. And I think that I don't know, a lot of us have that, and we can use it to bring ourselves down, and we don't realize that it's not who we are. I
Right. Right.
whole an experience in this human body, that negative self-talk is not me. It's a pattern and a program that I created to survive. It could have been things that happened when I was in school, or who knows what happened. I was sensitive. So I created it to protect myself when I was too young to do it another way. And I can uncreate it and more install that inner coach to lift myself up now that I know it, that now that I'm aware of it, now that I know it's not really me, and now I know that there's another alternative.
And let's talk about that for a second, because what you how you just describe yourself is probably how every person listening describes themselves, right? I mean, we all have that inner critic. And when we get in our cars and we're alone and the radio's not blasting or we're not talking on the phone, we start talking to ourselves, right? And as I have looked back on my life and I've spoken to a lot of people, a lot of the self-talk wasn't installed by us. It was installed by somebody else that we adopted. And the idea, and our parents have had a lot to do with it. My dad, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? Those kinds of words I have found stuck in my head, right? That have been unbelievably disempowering. And so I feel like everybody, I mean, are there exceptional people out there, Arlene, that you've met that don't have that negative critic inside of them?
There are a couple, there aren't many, but
Really?
the ones that do that I've met just feel like, I don't know, really high level people that they were subjected to the same. There's a couple of them, not many, like two or three that I've met, and a couple of them had been like mentors to mine in the past, but they were very aware of all the negative self talk that was coming towards them, but somehow they were evolved enough to say, they're messed up, not me. Now, most people don't have the wherewithal. I certainly didn't when I was younger to do that, but it's not like an all or nothing thing. There are a few people on this planet who are together enough that they weren't boned over like that. So
Now, were those people um, who figured it out, knew this when they were young, or were they people who figured it
they,
out as they
they
went
were
along?
they sort of were born that way. They just sort of knew it and they applied it, and that's what I've sort of understand from
Really? Okay.
very
Okay.
many people. I've met a couple. I just wanted to let you know that it's not an all or nothing thing on the planet.
Okay. Well, cool. Cool. Okay. So the inner voice. Well, how did you learn about it? How did you learn about it, and how did you fix it?
Well, it really started. I was very academic as a kid. I knew when I was 15 years old, I knew that I wanted to become an attorney. So I really applied myself. And by the time I was a sophomore in college, I was just putting so much stress on myself. And it happened in law
Mm,
schools. I was just allowing all that blah, 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 blah stuff to be there full blast. And it's a really painful, uncomfortable kind of suffering life experience. And so I was very motivated, to get out of it, not to have that experience anymore. And for some years, I went through some counseling and stuff like that. But I guess when my son was little and I wanted to be a better mom and be a better businesswoman and everything, I just sort of started on this healing journey. And I learned those sorts of healing modalities and I tried them out. And I studied all kinds of courses about, how we can empower ourselves, how we can, heal ourselves from the inside out, from like a heartfelt basis and not from our heads. And I studied with some mentors and I just was like, I know that there's more here. I know that we're not meant as human beings to suffer like this. And I want to start with myself as the primary subject, begin to heal myself more and more. And I feel like we're always in a process. We never like get there. It's always like
Absolutely.
we kind of going, maybe you're going around, but it's going, hopefully going upwards. But yeah, I just really felt motivated to do that because I like, this is no way to live. And I knew I wasn't alone. I could see a lot of people around me suffering because of what we create for ourselves in our heads, and especially going into comparison.
Absolutely. And you talked about when you were a mom, right? So you are at that point in time, you're both a mom and you're a practicing attorney, right? And so you're in a world where you're having to balance, okay, I'm a guy. I'm a guy. And my wife is she's like you. She's an absolute rock star. And she worked her entire career and we raised two amazingly wonderful kids. And for me, um, I always felt that it was relatively easy because I had you're laughing, but it was relatively easy because I grew up and I had one choice, and that choice was, yeah, you're a dad, but your job is to get out there and provide for the family. And that's what I did. But looking at my wife and looking at women out there, my goodness, right? Our expectations, my expectations, and I think the world's expectations is that women, the Western expectations are that women work, they have a career, they become super women, and they're supposed to take care of the house and everything else, right? And that's just not fair. And you talk about work life harmony. Um, it, I believe it's probably a whole lot harder for women than it is for men.
I don't know. I'm not in a man's shoes right now. It's a lot of things that it feels like it's sort of genetic for us. Like, we carry the babies, we're
Yes,
nurturers and stuff like that. And then the role is more like, I'm the provider, and I'm here to protect. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The problem is that if we want to have a career as a woman, we sort of need a tribe or the money to support us so we don't lose our minds. It's not easy. Yeah, I did wasn't didn't want to like give away my parenting skills to anybody else. I did have help. I had like a
sure.
nanny, and I would take my son to her house, and then when she got older and ill, her daughter stepped in, and she was in her early 20s and helped me with my son. So I was able to hire help to help me and find really wonderful people. But there are certain things that feel different from being a woman than a man, and they have to be honored, but we have to find a way to, I don't know, to make it more more harmonious. I think
Absolutely. And I
what
just wanted to say that I did not by any stretch of the imagination mean to sound anywhere close to disrespectful in what I talked about.
I don't feel
Uh,
like that at all. But I just
right?
wanted to give
Okay.
not at all.
Okay, because it's the exact opposite, right? I mean, my respect
Right.
for women, career women. My wife worked her entire career. She's worked her way up to senior level of Microsoft. Um, and my daughter now is in a really, really wonderful position where she's got three boys. She's got three kids, and so she's decided to be a mom. And that's a wonderful thing too, right?
I think whatever your choice is, it's just nice for women to have the choice now. And it's really
Yes.
hard for a lot of women to make that choice because of the economic times we're in. My mother was a
Right.
stay-at-home mom and she was a super strong woman. So no, I wasn't in judgment at all. It's just it's the world is changing and evolving and growing. And I think it's really important to not be closed-minded about how people are. And I can tell you really love and respect your wife and your children. So that's just coming through really, really clear. I wasn't feeling that at all. I was just sort of throwing in my
Okay.
perspective.
Okay. Well, good, good, good. So yeah, the world that we live in. So um, let's talk about that critic and let's talk about how you can change that critic, transform that critic into a coach, transform that energy into something less negative and more positive.
Okay, before I share that, I just want to share two things. There's no
Okay.
such thing as magic fairy dust that we can sprinkle over ourselves and jump from the inner critic to the inner coach. It's like if I wanted to become a marathon runner. When I was younger, I was a runner, but I was doing like half marathons and 10Ks and stuff like that. But you had to practice running a lot to do that. And the same thing with anything that we want to create for ourselves. If I want to turn that ship around from being that inner critic to being that inner coach, it takes practice, 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 and being kind and patient and tolerant with ourselves. So I can share a few tips, but I don't want anyone in your readership or your audience to think that they're a failure because they've tried for a week and they're still the same, because it just takes a while if we're practicing anything new to take that on board and make it a part of our life.
I'm really glad you said that because one of the themes of this podcast of finding better is that you got to do the work, right? There is no such thing as magic fairy dust in anything. And so but it's a muscle. Everything that we want to make better is, I use a metaphor of building the muscle. And this is no different. You got to do the work. And practice, 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 and keep going at it, and eventually that it becomes a habit and becomes part of who you are, I think, right?
And also, I believe together is better. If we try to go about making a major change in our life as a lone wolf, it's really easy to stop and fail. I've always believed in mastermind groups or groups of people that come together with a common purpose to evolve and grow in a certain way. I call it a group of like-minded souls. Whatever it is, it's or even just one buddy that you work with, you check in with, or you text and say, "I've done this, you've done that." So you have an accountability buddy, and you're not choosing to do this by yourself. It's really, really important to have a tribe or at least one other person when we're choosing to do something new.
That
And
is
so
amazing. Yeah, I mean that of itself right there, having an accountability buddy or having a tribe, right? And not you're one of the things that I tell people all the time is you're not alone, and you don't have to be alone if you are alone. If you're alone, you're choosing to be alone.
right. And there's all
So,
sorts of meetup groups and everything. And even like
mhm.
in Colorado, where it's very, I mean, I can join oh, I haven't joined it yet, but there's a hiking group of women that are over 50 and you can hike in the mountains and do all sorts of cool stuff here. And it wouldn't be for having my inner coach, but sometimes that boosts up your inner coach because you're just doing something that you love to do with other people. And that's one way you can boost up your inner coach too. Maybe you've always wanted to throw pottery or learn to play the guitar or I don't know, make an amazing garden. And if you do it with other people, there's something really soulful about that where it helps to build you up inside, you know, how you feel about yourself, so that the other things in your life you want to do, you're more empowered to do it as well. So there's not a one size fits all.
Right, right. And different people have different preferences, right? Um,
Right.
yeah. And so how does the coach emerge?
How does a coach emerge? Well, we all have a coach inside. If the coach,
Uh-huh.
we have a coach that goes blah, blah, blah to us, we go, I had a coach that goes, way to go, right? So with the inner coach, the easiest technique that I love to impart to people is that we all know that if someone we care about comes to us and they're having a problem and they're feeling down about themselves and they're telling us everything that's going wrong and all the roadblocks and obstacles they are experiencing in their life, we are fully capable of supporting them, nurturing, loving them, champion them. And if they have their head up a dark place, we might read them the right act in a very loving way. So we already have those skills. No one has to teach us. We already know how to do it. But we have some sort of block in our mind that maybe it hasn't even occurred to us that we can turn around and give it to ourselves. So if my inner critic starts going blah, 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 I can go, wait a minute. That's not the truth. I am choosing, how can I love and nurture and champion myself right now? And do I have my head up a dark place where I need to say, stop that behavior? That's not okay. So that's how we can practice that inner coach. We can practice with ourselves because we have the skill to be that kind of person with somebody else. So all we have to do is begin to turn around and give it to ourselves and let go of that stuff we've been taught or we take it on that says that's selfish, why are you doing that? All those kind of things where especially women, I think, have been taught that that engaging in self-care and self-love activities is selfish. I'm just really glad I
Right.
never took that. But a lot of women have, and it's just not the truth. Because how can we possibly give from an empty cup?
That's right.
If
That's
we're
right.
giving to everybody else and nothing to ourselves, well, that's not very wise. Because if we give from a full cup that's overflowing, our cup is always going to be full, and the people around us are going to enjoy our company more as well.
Okay. You just said a lot. Let me unwind a couple of things.
Okay,
Um,
good.
we doctor heal thyself is what you just said, right? I mean, like you said, we are capable of giving other people love and understanding and patience and forgiveness and guidance and things like that. And yet, you're right. It's a lot of us don't practice this on ourselves. And as you were talking about that, and I was imagining myself getting, finding my and realizing that I am telling myself that I'm not good enough, that I can't do it, and that I've never done it before. Therefore, um, I two words came to mind, and those two words were shut and up. Right in my head, shut up. Right, you don't know what you're talking about, and I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try that because just the other day I was talking with somebody. I was in an interview, and I was talking about how a very dear friend of mine scolded me because I made the statement to her, I'm not always the sharpest knife in the drawer. And, that's kind of disempowering. I mean it as kind of self-deprecating humor, but I learned that self-deprecating humor isn't good, right? I used it. Did you hear that? Past tense. I used self-deprecating humor, to kind of make people comfortable with me. But at the same time, it wasn't good. It wasn't an empowering thing. It was more disempowering than anything. So I've taken that language out of my mind, out of my head. And so yeah, when you hear those words or you start getting those thoughts, I'm gonna, or when I do, I'm gonna say, shut up.
Can I add something to that to maybe change your mind on that one too?
Okay.
The only see something is that I've done that to myself and it hasn't worked. And the reason it hasn't worked is this. We all have like kids, I know like kids inside of ourselves that maybe feel stuck in time where something happened and we didn't know how to handle it and they're hurt and whatever. And then I have some teenage, I'm speaking for myself. I can't speak for anyone else. I have teenagers that have been stuck inside because I was a little bit rebellious as a teenager in my own special kind of manipulative way. And I did some things that were pretty stupid. And so I sort of like, I don't want anything to do with you and your behavior. So the thing is that these bits of ourselves, these teens and these kids that engage in this behavior as maybe a self-defensive mechanism, most of the time, all they need is our love and support. So I sort of turn around and go, okay, how old is this Arlene inside of me? Is she 8? Is she 20? Is she 15? What's going on here? And I just turn around and I love that her. I'm like, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. That wasn't right of me. I told you I was going to come
Ooh.
back and I did. And and it's not your job to do X, Y, and Z, whatever's going on. It's not your job to make this business meeting go great or to have this great speech or to do whatever I need to do. It's my job. It's not yours. And I'm sorry that I allowed you to be in the driver's seat. And I'm not leaving again. I'm going to stay here and love you. My teens have been like this sometimes for years until they finally begin to let me in a little bit. But I found that for me personally and for some of the people that I've worked with, a lot more effective because these bits of ourselves that act this way, some can be really dysfunctional, broken, and we have the love that they need because they're a part of us that got stuck or that
And
we
when you're t
abandoned.
when you're talking about we have the love they need, You're talking about the they being you when you were 18 years old.
Well, I always feel like I don't know, I'm just not a human being. I'm a soul and spirit having this human experience. So the
Yeah.
greater bit has the love that's much bigger than this human right here, that all these bits of me need that are a little bit um hiding and scared, or they're a little bit broken, or they feel abandoned and neglected and betrayed because I wasn't there for them. Um, so I, or we, however you want to say it, we have that love to give to them. That's like the perfect love, because it's me to me.
I'm stunned. I've never heard that before. Of course, I
Really.
mean, I haven't heard a lot of things before, but I've
It's
never heard,
okay. Hi.
right? I've never heard that before. And I'm just envisioning because, there's, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, there are a lot of things about me that I'm just like, gosh, I wish I was different. Gosh, I wish I hadn't done that. And when you just talked about, you know, basically facing that person, I there was a famous movie called The Shawshank Redemption. Do you remember that?
I've seen it about
Okay.
15 times. I love
Right,
it.
right. And um, Morgan Freeman in that movie, he's it's towards the end of the movie, and he's in his parole meeting, and he says, and without going into it, he says, I wish I could talk to that young man. I would talk to that young man that I was when I did that terrible, terrible crime. And he went into this kind of a soliloquy about what he would do. Um, I'd hold him, right? I'd try to talk sense into him. And you just had to do that. And I'm just like, whoa, right? Um, and when you said that, I'm like, we can do that. I can go to my 13-year-old self. I can go to my 16-year-old self. I know that person. That person is me, right? And I can say to that person, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you.
Yeah.
And I'm here.
And just from personal experience, my teenage girls were going, yeah, whatever. So it took me a while to just it took me a while to just sit there and say, okay, I know that's how you feel, because I was a pretty rebellious teenager, at least inside. And I just stayed. I'm like, okay, I understand you feel that way because I abandoned you. I didn't want anything to do with you. I didn't like your behavior. That was not right. And I just stayed there. Even no matter what I was doing, I could feel in my heart that I was sitting next to those teenagers, and I didn't go away. And eventually they started melting and talking to me, but they were a lot harder nut to crack than the younger kids who were just, if you said, let's go get an ice cream cone and I'll read you a story, they were like, are you? But the teenage me took a while.
I was just gonna say, we're not talking about other people here. We're not talking about our teenage kids. We're talking about the teenage you that
I
you're at,
know, but that
right?
teenage you was really, really pissed off with me for abandoning her and not liking her, all the stuff she did, because I did it with her, and so why should she get the brunt of all that? And she was right. I abandoned her, I neglected her, I betrayed her. I wasn't there for her. I made her the bad guy. I did
Okay,
that.
so yeah, so let me back up a second because we're sounding kind of like this conversation is kind of sounding like we have multiple personalities.
I don't have multiple I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, I'm not that 16 or 15 or 17-year-old girl anymore, but I can feel her inside of me. And so I don't know. I feel like I don't know about you, but I'm a very different person than when I was 16 and 17. A
Sure.
lot has happened, grown, and more the soul and the spirit that I am has anchored so that I can be a better service. And so I'm not her anymore, but I love her, and I did have those experiences, but it just feels like a different moment in time.
Wonderful, wonderful. And that was just a wonder. I didn't want my audience going, "Oh man, we're talking about Sybil here, right?" Or we're talking about somebody with multiple
I
personalities.
wouldn't do
No.
that. I'd make more sense than that. Or
Huh?
maybe not. I don't know. Who knows? No one's called me Sybil yet, so that would be a new experience.
Yeah, and I'm not calling you civil either.
No, you're not. I know you're not.
Yeah,
I'm not taking anything personally.
yeah, yeah. But that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful because I mean, I'm gonna do that. I'm literally gonna sit down and do that because I want to, right? I want to have a conversation with 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 those teenagers. I want to have conversations with those kids. And I think it's going to be heart-rendering. I think it's going to be very useful. I just know it's going to be an amazing thing, an amazing
Yeah.
experience.
I have no expectations because we never know. But if
Yeah,
you're ready to love, that's the best that we can do.
yeah. Ooh. Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Okay.
Okay.
Um, you know, uh, heart, love, it's one of maybe my favorite song of all time is a late Whitney Houston's Greatest Love of All. Learning to love yourself, it is the greatest love of all. And yet for so many people, it is so hard to do. Is this a kind of exercise that can help that?
Well, I believe so because, people like want to get that. A lot of people, when you're in a relationship, you're looking for someone to fill up like some sort of hole inside of you. And then they maybe attract people to them that aren't the best thing for them, that it's not a healthy relationship. There's something about it that doesn't work. And the best way to have that kind of healthy whole relationship is to fill ourselves up with love, and basically that's just love and self-care. And if you don't know how to do it and you're a woman, maybe getting a manicure and pedicure and getting a massage is how you fill yourself up with love. Or it might be going out and gardening, or it might be taking a walk with a friend, or whatever floats your boat, that you show yourself how you love yourself, and you can really have the ability just to go, oh, I'm just going to fill myself with love. I sort of visualize when I do my meditation in the morning that there's just this pure white light and this rose pink love of source, just pouring through my body and filling me up. But if that doesn't float your boat, doing things that show yourself that you love you can be a good start, because a lot of our parents did the best they could to love us, but the best that they could do, because this is what they got from their parents, was conditional love, which means I love you provided you do X, Y, and Z. You're
Right.
a good girl. You go to school, you go to college, you do this, this, and this. You provide me with this number of grandkids. Whatever it is, it's not unconditional. And so we have to learn how to begin to give that unconditional love to ourselves. And if it's getting a mani-pedi or going out with the guys to watch a baseball game and that fills up your heart, it's a start.
One of the things I'm going to try, and I'm going to see what happens, is as you talk to as you mentioned, talking to your teenage self, and there's lots of teenage selves that we have within ourselves. Part of talking and reconnecting with those people is to tell them that I love them. And it it's really interesting. The feeling that I have right now, just the feeling in my spirit right now is really cool. Because I'm thinking about experiences of myself that I'm not proud of, or I wish I could change.
Yes, me
And
too.
going back to that young person and saying, you know what? It goes back to the you're not a bad person, you just did a bad thing, right? And but I love you. I love you.
And I love you.
Yeah, and I love you. Um, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. It'll be part of what I do. It'll be part of what I do. And so when you what how does so when you do that, and going back to the coach part of it, um how do you help people lead themselves into
Yeah. So
that coaching world?
Well, I always know that when I'm working as a coach, that the people I'm working with have the answers within themselves. If I told them
Hmm.
how to way, it's not going to be their way. It's not going to be right for them. So what I can do as a coach is if I see certain patterns of behavior, I might say, I'm noticing that you're telling yourself that you can't do X, Y, and Z. And, I'm wondering what's going on with you about that. So or I'm noticing that as you're talking about this really excruciating moment in your life, you're laughing. And so what's going on that you're laughing as you're telling me this really difficult moment? And so what I can do is I can observe, what's going on for them. And, that can be like, whoa, I didn't even, because when I, as a coach, when someone coaches me or when I was a coach in training, I was like, wow, I didn't even know I was doing that or I was saying that. And so if we bring that kind of stuff to people's attention, then they can do something with it. Because once we become aware, then we can begin to change things. And sometimes it's a direct way, or sometimes it's just asking them, powerful questions to help them move towards a goal or a focus that they have. And as we're letting them talk and we're summarizing something they say and maybe asking another question, they're beginning to have a new experience.
And as you do that, is your goal, for lack of a better term, very, very much a layman, is your goal to make this process kind of a self-serving process? And I asked that question based on one of the things that I introduced you with, of wholeheartedly leading themselves to create the life they desire.
Right. So as a coach, I was trained in with the Global Coaching Academy that has like they teach you how to hold like a really unconditionally loving, judgment-free space. So I am modeling that for my clients. I'm holding this huge space of love. There's no judgment involved whatsoever. And so that they can experience that and begin to bring that into their own lives, and that they can begin to make choices for themselves that are more about self-love and self-care. It's always someone's choice. And as a coach, I don't put any sort of timetable on that. Maybe they have to go through a lot of sessions where all of a sudden some sort of penny drops and they can begin to take a small step forward. We all have our journey. And as you know, every journey begins with one step. And I don't know when that one step is going to happen.
Right.
So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I gave it a go.
Well, I think the answer was that you don't want folks to be dependent on you for the rest of your life, right? But or for the rest of their life. But and you're giving this space of love and no judgment, so they can experience it and create it for themselves. Did I say that about right?
Right. And so that lots of times when anyone's had a conversation in their life, they've always been with people that are thinking about what they're going to say as you're talking. And they're always wanting maybe to one up them or turn the conversation back to them. And to have that sort of experience when that's not happening at all, where they're able just to completely share, be themselves, can be a really transformational, cathartic experience in and of itself.
Okay. Okay. So how do people, you know, what would for people who want to start the journey, for folks who are listening who are going, this is really cool. What can I do? What are a couple of steps I can take to um to start down this path?
Well, maybe one really simple step is there's been studies about this, is get yourself a journal and at least two times a week, write something in the journal for maybe 5 minutes more if you like about what you're grateful for that day. Gratitude has a really high vibration. It's much higher than unconditional love. And if you put yourself in a state of gratitude before you go to sleep, while you're in the sleep state, it's going to help to mulch and build that gratitude, and it can become more a part of your life. But it's not like I am very happy for that I have a roof over my head. It's like, wow, I really had this great lunch today with my dear friend, or I watched this great movie and it really inspired me. Whatever it is, just a couple of simple things that kind of really touched your heart that day. And they did a study, and they had three groups: one that wrote in their journal every day everything they could complain about that they didn't like about their life, Another group just wrote stuff maybe 3 or 4 times a week of what they were neutral about. I went to the grocery store, I drove my car. The third group, twice a week for 15 minutes, wrote things that they were grateful for. And at the end of 6 weeks, their happiness factor was like 25% higher. I don't know how they measured it, but it was so I don't remember the people that did the study, but they were really well known. And it works. I know, I've played with that, and it does make a huge difference in your life, because what you focus on is what you get more of in your life. And to do it before bed is, you can do it anytime. I think before bed is a really powerful time, because then you're working with it in the sleep state.
You Gratitude has a higher vibration than self-love. Is that what you said?
Gratitude has a higher vibration than unconditional love, which is
Than
love with,
unconditional love.
right? It's a lot higher
Whoa,
vibration.
really? What
Unconditional
does
love is base level of love. Well, that's where you give love without any expectation of getting anything back in return. And then there's lots of sacred qualities, but gratitude has a very, very high vibrational level.
Wow. Okay, so a gratitude journal. And
Or
and
just,
you just said twice a week.
yeah, write it twice a week. If you want to do more, do more. I just find when I write a few things in my gratitude journal before I go to bed, it really changes my experience the next day, no matter how challenging it is or how much is on my schedule.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, people could do that. And
Yeah.
folks, I could, all I'll say with what we just talked about is try it. You might like it. And if you don't like it, don't do it anymore. But try it and see what happens.
Yeah, maybe give it 6 weeks. Write down how you're feeling at the beginning of the 6 weeks, and then notice how if you're any different by the end of the 6 weeks. See how you work with that study that they did.
Okay. Okay. Yes. In fact, I would even go so far as say, please try it. Please try it. Um, you may be absolutely amazed. I want to tell you a quick story, and this is going to sound crazy to you, Arlene. This is going to sound crazy to you. But I used to travel a lot. I'm retired after almost 40 years in high tech. Um, and I used to travel a lot, and I traveled to some places that were kind of remote. And so one day I'm driving down the road. I don't have anything to do. I'm in a place where there's no cell phone coverage. Yes, I lived in a time when there was no cell phone coverage. And so I just decided to just, I just said, "Hey, mom and dad, thank you. Thanks for my life." And I said, "Hey, grandmas and grandpas, we got two parents, we got four grandparents." I said, "Thank you. Thank you for your part in bringing me to this moment." And I said, "Hey, great grandparents." We got eight of those. Every one of us does. I said, "Thank you very much." So I'm going down the road saying, "Hey, um, great grandparents, thank you very much. Great great grandparents, thank you very much. Great 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 grandparents, thank you very much." I went 50 generations going down the road, going, "Dear great 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 grandparents, thank you very much." And I just did this because I thought, gratitude, gratitude. If it weren't for every single one of those people, if any one of those people did anything differently, I wouldn't be here at this very moment. And so I went and I was I was meeting with a friend of mine who's kind of a very spiritual person. And I told her about it. And she says, I mean, she literally stopped what she was doing. I mean, immediately. And she said, "You do what?" And I told her, I said, I'm, I drive down the road and I just thank my ancestors. She goes, "Well, how long have you been doing that?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe it's 3 months, 4 months." She goes, "Well, what happened?" And my first reaction was, "What do you mean, what happened?" But right in the middle of asking that question, I went, "What happened?" And I started thinking about it, Arlene. And I went, "Things have been really good since then." It was just one of those things where I mean, maybe it was a coincidence, but to me there was something about it. And she said, "I have never known anybody who's done anything like that." And she said, that is so, so powerful. Keep doing it. And I do. I do. What's
Yeah,
that?
it's 100% right because you're working with the law of attraction, which is what you focus on is what you get more of in your life. So if you're focusing on all those things you're grateful for, of course it's going to lift you up and you're going to attract more things to be grateful for in your life.
Oh,
Oh,
okay. So okay, folks out there, if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're looking for something to do, right? There's a rhythm to it, and the rhythm is dear great 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 grandparents. And you do that 10 times, you've got 50 generations. And you know 50 generations, if you think of two, because it takes two people to make a baby, to the 50th power, I think that's like a quadrillion people. 10 generations is 1,000, 20 generations is 1,000,000, 30 generations is 1,000,000,000, 40 generations is a quadrillion, 50 generations is a quintillion. I think that's what it is.
your brain
And
is much
the
better.
other thing, what's that?
Your brain is much better at this than I am calculating those numbers.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And there's never been a trillion people on planet Earth, right? And so then you think to yourself, okay, so how does that math work? Well, that math works with intermingling. And my wife said, "Ooh, that's gross." But the fact of the matter is, mathematically, we're all related.
And I
Somehow
want to
we're
say
all
to your
related.
audience too that if you don't want to do the grandparent thing, pick anything can be grateful for and work with that when you're in the car. You know, when I'm driving anywhere, almost anywhere in Colorado, the mountains are right there. I'm in the foothills. All you have to do is look, and they always change how they look, whether there's snow out, whether it's a sunrise, whether there's a sunset, whether the sun is out. They are friggin' amazing. There's so much to be grateful for. It doesn't have to be the ancestor thing. If
That's
you
right.
don't
That's right.
there's all sorts of things you can pick what you like, but that's a good idea.
We have so look around you. I mean, I've got a million things just looking around here that I can be grateful for. Let alone the love and the family and just millions and millions of things. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. And you know what, folks? Uh, I, okay, I won't go there. I won't come to it. I won't. Please try it. Please try it. I'm not even going to ask for a second suggestion, Arlene, because that one was just so amazing. And and we've talked about all kinds of things that people can do, right? Little mindset shifts. And yeah, this has been wonderful. All right, so close us out. What do you want to leave with my audience? And then I'll ask you if how people can reach you if they want to.
I want to leave with your audience a trinity of being as a trinity, like in its kindness, patience, and tolerance, each part of the triangle. So just choose to be kind and patient and tolerant with yourself. And that goes really nice with gratitude. But when we show ourselves kindness and patience and tolerance, or if we see ourselves not being kind, patient, and tolerant, we can go, oh, that's not a good look. And we can pick being kind, patient, and tolerant. That also helps to turn things around as well. And I really feel that we tend not to be that kind, patient, and tolerant with ourselves. So maybe give that a go too.
That is amazing because when you said that the Trinity of being kind, patient, and tolerant, I thought you were going to say to others, but you said to yourself. Wow,
When we fill ourselves up with love, it's a lot easier to love anyone or anything else. We have to start with ourselves.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, okay. You just blew my mind out, blew my mind again. Okay, so if folks want to learn more about you or from you or reach out to you, how best to do that?
You can go to my website, Jewel Consultancy, JEWEL consultancy.com. My email address and phone number is there. So I'll just give you my phone. You can always text me 720 936-2634 in the US and Canada. So
And
I'm in
she
the
doesn't have to repeat that because you can just rewind the tape. Um, so, oh, I was just going to call you Jewel. All right, but it's jewelconsultancy.com. And oh my gosh, Arlene, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You've given us so much to not only think about, contemplate, but to do and to move forward with. Um, Love to have you back sometime.
would
And
be great.
so, yeah, this has just been wonderful. So thank you for joining me. I love you. God bless you, everybody, folks. That inner critic, turn it to your inner coach. We talked about things that you can do, and try the gratitude journal. Just try it and see what happens. 6 weeks, 2 times a week. That's 12 times. You can do that. Anybody can do anything 12 times, right? Okay. So with that, everybody out there, I love you. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. Please share this, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.